Israeli F-35 jets sailed over Saudi airspace, Syrian airspace to get to Qatar and killed 6 people. Now, Donald Trump has had a very curious response to this. Many were asking what was his involvement in all of this. This was a statement he put on Truth Social. The Trump administration was notified by the U.S. military that Israel was attacking Hamas, which unfortunately was located in a section of Doha, the capital of Qatar. It was a decision made by Prime Minister Netanyahu. It was not made by me. Unilaterally bombing inside Qatar, a sovereign nation and close ally of the U.S. that is working very hard and bravely taking risks with us to broker peace, does not advance Israel or America's goal. He was notified of the strikes. He notified Steve Witkoff immediately that they were occurring, and unfortunately, it was too late to stop the attack. Talk about the significance of this strike on Qatar. What does it reflect about where the situation is, not only when it comes to, of course, Israel's purported plans to occupy Gaza fully, but really the entire region as a whole, and how it reflects on the United States?
Trump is a liar, period. There are 2 ways that Israel could launch that attack without the United States knowing. The first is no way, and the second is no way in hell. This has been a pattern, and it's not, we can't really pin it directly on Trump. This has been a collaboration between Israeli intelligence and U.S. intelligence. It goes back into the Biden administration, and maybe goes back as far as Trump's first term, where the United States uses the ploy of saying, hey, we're going to have talks with you. So be at this location at this date and this time. And so when the foreign suckers show up, they can be killed. We saw a version of that with General Soleimani during Donald Trump's first term. We saw another version of it with the murder of Sheikh Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, by the Israelis. But they, again, were meeting. The Hezbollah leadership was meeting to consider a U.S. peace proposal. We saw a version of that again with respect to the Iran meeting, getting prepared for a meeting with U.S. officials, and then 2 days before that meeting, they're hit by Israelis. We saw a version of it in Russia with the attacks that took place on June 1st. In Russia. We saw it with Hania. The Iranians, the Palestinians, and now the Gulfies, they need to give up their Western cell phones. Get rid of Apple, get rid of Samsung. They need to go Huawei. I think Huawei may be the only secure solution, because what happens is the United States basically gets to set the time and place of the meeting. And that's what happened here. That these Hamas officials were gathered to consider a proposal from Donald Trump for ending the war. They had their cell phones. Now, the story they're putting out is, oh, we left our cell phones in the office and we went to another room to pray. Yeah, you probably went 200 yards down the street and got into a bunker to pray, because I think that's their cover story they're putting out. I suspect it was actually, they got warned by a foreign intelligence agency that's well disposed towards the Palestinians and towards the Arabs, to say, hey, the Israelis, they're going to come in and they're going to hit you, and the United States is complicit with it. There's no way those Israeli aircraft could have transited Qatar and then hit the site. I mean, right outside is Al Udeid Air Force Base. I don't know about Colonel Wilkerson, but I've been there. Big base. It is the Central Command's, U.S. Central Command's forward headquarters. It is the center where all air operations, drones, planes that throughout the region going up into Turkey, they're coordinated out of that center right there. So there is no way in hell that the Donald Trump didn't know about this. He absolutely knew about it, because he was promised, hey, Mr. President, we're going to go in there. We're going to use the same tactics we've used successfully before. We're going to kill all the Hamas leaders, and then they're going to be compelled to negotiate, and you'll be the hero. And Trump goes, okay, yeah, I'll go along with that. But then when it blows up and it doesn't pan out as they claimed, Trump all of a sudden, it looks like Michael Jackson doing the moonwalk backwards. Oh, no, I didn't know. I didn't find out about this until it happened. It's a lie.
Here is the Qatari prime minister. He comes out with a strong statement, but I'm curious about your assessment of what kind of retaliation could actually be coming to Israel after this attack.
The state of Qatar is committed to act in a decisive way with anything that would target its territories, and will reserve the right to retaliate, and will take all the needed measures to retaliate. And under the directives of His Highness the Emir, the security of the citizens and the residents is our top priority. And based on that, as of tomorrow, God willing, we will review all the policies and the directives in order to deter such actions and measures in the future, so that it cannot happen again.
Well, my first remarks have to be what my general remarks are all the time about this situation in its most enormous geopolitical, geostrategic sense. It ain't Israel that's leading us by the nose. It's us using Israel to do our wishes, period. So I won't come at it in any way but that. That means I think Larry is right, but let me put a little bit of a footnote on that. We have this philosophy in the military, which has pretty much taken over now, and I saw it impact us seriously in April of 2001, April 10th, as a matter of fact, when the commander-in-chief, now we call them combatant commanders, in the Pacific overstepped his writ and sent an EP-3, a U.S. reconnaissance plane, slow moving, too close to Hainan Island, a very militarized portion of China. And up came an F-8 with one of their best pilots in it, who got a little bit too close to the EP-3, clipped his own tail off, fell into the South China Sea, and the pilot died. But he so damaged the EP-3, it had to make a forced landing on Hainan Island with a lot of very secure gear on it. And the 24, as I recall, sailors on board were not able to use their thermite grenades and other things quickly enough. And so the plane and some secure gear fell into the Chinese hands. Now, Colin Powell got on that right away and handled it really well, and there wasn't a crisis that resulted from it. It actually started with his cell phone call to the Chinese Leadership Party, which was at that time traveling in South America. And he managed to get Chen Chi-chen, I believe it was, who was he's dead now, but he was the person in the Chinese hierarchy that knew the most about North America and about the United States. And they worked it out over the cell phone. All to say that commander had been given what we call concept of the operations. And there's no commander in the unified command structure today like the central command commander in terms of having leeway to do things within the general concept of operations. Larry described the general concept of operations pretty well and gave some examples of some of the perfidy encompassed by that concept of operations, whether it was Soleimani, or more egregiously, it was the people we murdered in Tehran and environs, or whether it was this incident. And in the sense that, did Trump know? I would say in his defense that this might have been in that general concept of operations. Netanyahu and the unified command commander are like that, lips and teeth, as Mao Zedong said. And they might have done it without Trump's explicit knowledge, but I will guarantee you that he's given the general concept of operations his blessing, so they can act within that, both Bibi and that central command commander. To add to this, I don't know if this is verifiable, but I heard from some people in the region that there were U.S. aircraft up at the time. Now,
Yes.
It would have been senseless to put a cap up, combat air patrol with, F-16s, F-15s, F-35s, whatever. That would have been too indicative. So they put a few Ashen Trashers up there, but their role was to make sure there was no interference developing with regard to this strike, which says, as Larry just said, we knew all about it. Timing, probably the ordnance, probably the targets and everything else. So is Trump really being disingenuous, or is he mal-informed of specifics that might come back and haunt him? I don't know the answer to that question, because I will tell you something else. This is my field. I've studied every administration and the national security decision-making process therein since Eisenhower. There is no system in this administration. There is no system at all. Yeah. There is no national security advisor who is responsible for managing this system, however badly or well. None. So how in the world are they making decisions like this in particular that the president knows the specific details of, or that even blesses them? I don't know. I think this general concept is out there. And let's back up to one other thing too. This is Bibi's way of stopping negotiations. This is the way he does it. And if anybody sits down with the enemy, Hamas, he's going to try to stop it any way he possibly can. And he's getting more desperate in that regard, because he's getting more desperate that he hasn't destroyed Hamas and that he isn't going to. And so he's going to have to expand this war. He's going to have to expand it to Lebanon, to Syria, or more likely to Iran. He's got to do that for political purposes and for his own survival. He's got to do that. So he wants no peace agreement at all. And he doesn't give a damn about the hostages. We all know that. So I agree mostly with what Larry said.
What was leaked out as this attack occurred was that Trump's advisors were infuriated with the attack, and that when they found out about it, it was as if they were not consulted with, that the Trump administration was not notified. And then we come to find out that they did receive notification, supposedly, but that notification was too late. What do you make of this, Larry, of the plausible deniability? Because Colonel Wilkerson brought up a point where we could be looking at chaos of a system that just absolutely is working on its own despite it, or we're looking at plausible deniability, which is a kind of strategy of moving along to what Colonel Wilkerson says is using Israel for the U.S.'s purposes, while pretending that it has nothing to do with the U.S.
Yeah, it's total, to quote Ray McGovern, male bovine excrement. Look, as Colonel Wilkerson alluded to, the planning process. I spent 23 years scripting out. They were exercises under what was called the 0300 and the 0400 plan. But these were counterterrorism exercises. However, the planning process, so this is crisis management planning. You've got two types of planning in the military. There's a book called Jopes that actually a guy I used to work for, he wrote Jopes. And he knew the thing like a rabbi knows the Talmud. But when you get into crisis planning, it's short term. But you go through the same steps, whether it's long term or short term. You go through the same steps. You get an alert or a warning order. You then get from the combatant commander a concept of operations for how they're going to respond to that warning order. Then you get from the headquarters an execution or a deployment order, and then that could be in conjunction with a warning order. The point is that we've got U.S. military liaison personnel at Israeli military headquarters. They're not kept on the outside. They're there. They're there for an important reason, to deconflict and to make sure that Israel doesn't go, that the Israelis want to make sure that when they carry out an operation, that we're not going to interfere in any way that will prevent them from carrying out what they're going to do. So within this, they had advanced warning about when this meeting was going to take place, because they knew the location, they knew the time. But this means on the military planning side that Central Command forward there in Al Udeid Air Force Base most likely were involved in the planning and coordinating with the Israelis. They knew how many planes were coming. They knew where the location and destination was, and they knew what they had to clear out to make sure there wasn't any other U.S. or allied traffic in the area. So these Trump advisors trying to protect, they're acting like they're the police chief in the movie Casablanca. Gambling in the casino. I'm shocked. Give me my money. That's what's going on here. This is Claude Rains on steroids.
This is what Israel's ambassador to the U.S. had to say.
If we didn't get them this time, we'll get them the next time. Israel under Prime Minister Netanyahu is changing the face of the Middle East. We have degraded Hezbollah, we've degraded Hamas, the Houthis, and Iran, the head of the snake that's leading these proxies in an effort to destroy Israel. When we defeat these proxies of Iran, when we defeat Islamic extremism, and actually that will benefit our neighbors in the region who are moderate and want to live in a state of peace with us. So right now we may be subject to a little bit of criticism. They'll get over it. And Israel is being changed for the better. The region is being changed for the better as we remove these enemies of peace and these enemies of Western civilization.
Israel is essentially, via its ambassador, saying it'll keep doing this. It doesn't really matter what anyone else says. Colonel Wilkerson, to you.
Does anyone doubt that they'll keep doing this? And oh, by the way, let me just correct one thing that he said. The major thing that they are doing is not any of the things that he so carefully and precisely outlined. The major thing that they're doing is killing, probably at this point, at least 200,000, some think it's as high as 300,000, of civilians, 50% of whom are women and children, and probably 10 to 15% are over 70. That's the main thing they're doing, is slaughtering an entire people. Ooh, I think they call that genocide. I think almost every genocide scholar in the world has commented on this now in the affirmative. Yes, it's a genocide. Yes, that's what they're doing. So, Mr. Ambassador, you left out the principal thing that Bibi Netanyahu is doing, and you left it out because it is above all not the extermination of Hamas, not the extermination of Hezbollah, not the extermination of anybody in Syria standing in your way. Yes, those are incidental objectives, but the strategic objective is to get rid of those people who, under some scenarios that people have been talking about for 40 years plus, might someday form a state and oppose you in a visceral sort of way. That's your objective, to destroy an entire people. And yes, Mr. Ambassador, had you mentioned that, I would have nodded my head up and down and said, yes, you're making great progress in doing that. But let me finish. You're making it for the United States, who is orchestrating you to do this. And the last orchestration, the final orchestration, is to destroy the Persian nation, period. That will be your Waterloo, dear Ambassador.
Colonel Wilkerson often brings up too. I mean, that scenario you brought up with Iran, that is this one of the trigger points of a World War III scenario that we are quickly and have already become mired in. So your assessment of those comments?
They spend too much time watching the Israeli propaganda about Israeli military capabilities. So we're now 24 months since October 7th. In another 3 weeks we'll be there. Israel entered and started its campaign against Hamas. Now, I think with the benefit of hindsight, we realize that this was all, the Israelis allowed this to happen in much the same way that Franklin Delano Roosevelt allowed Pearl Harbor to happen, because they knew we needed an incident like this to be able to justify Israel's campaign of extermination and genocide, because they want to cleanse the land of this unclean people, this Amalek, so that they can create Judah and Samaria and fulfill the evil fantasy that's in their Bible. What we've seen, despite having every military advantage that you could have, number one, they had the enemy, the Palestinians, confined to a specific geographic area, and Israel controlled all points of access, ingress and egress from that area, from day one. That's number one. Number two, Israel has all sorts of intelligence capabilities, both human and electronic, signal, satellite, to be able to intercept all communications from the outset. They have tanks, they have artillery, they have armored personnel carriers, they have long-range missiles, they have fixed-wing aircraft that can drop 1,000, 2,000-pound bombs. So everything that Israel has, Hamas doesn't. Hamas has sidearms, rifles. They have maybe a couple of heavy machine guns here and there. They've got some 50 caliber sniper rifles, which are formidable weapons. They got some mortars and some RPGs. And they're outnumbered by the Israelis by a factor of at least 3 or 4 to 1. Despite all of those advantages, this greatest military in the Middle East has failed to defeat or eliminate Hamas. And the other thing is sort of, I'm wondering how this is taking place. Hamas continues to get resupplied somehow, because I don't think they had 2 to 3 years of stockpiles buried under the ground. Maybe they did, but when you're firing ammunition, when you're setting off hand grenades, when you're planning anti-tank mines, once they go off, you have to get new ones. Where do those come from? So Israel now in the midst of failing to defeat Hamas, and just, this delusional ambassador, oh yeah, we've degraded Hezbollah. Hezbollah is still there. Hezbollah is just choosing right now not to fight. And they are in the process of rearming, re-equipping. They're still quite a capable organization. Israel has extended itself now beyond Lebanon into Syria, as well as into the West Bank. They don't have an unlimited supply of manpower. So how is Israel going to sustain this level of operations in an ops tempo? I don't get it. They will crack at some point, because they do not have the ability to sustain operations. They lack the strategic depth.
And Danny, just to reinforce what Larry's saying, I'm hearing now that he's actually reaching into the absolute ether to find commanders to replace dead ones or ones that have left because they don't like what he's doing, actually on the front lines.
We do have a situation where Israel is right now engaging in bombings of Yemen, and they're doing so in response to Ansar Allah's continued campaign, firing now cluster missile munitions into Israel, continuing the blockade of the Red Sea. But Israel's decapitation, if we could call it a strategy, it's not working out so well. And they also have this full-scale occupation that is also not going so well. I know you speak a lot about the Israeli military woes, but they're coming out pretty full circle now as they plan to militarily take over Gaza outside of just bombing and massacring.
I think they've taught themselves and fought themselves into a trap. And I think the trap is closing on them now. I've just to pick up on something Larry said about Hamas's ammunition, from what I'm hearing, a lot of their ammunition, as it were, is the same it was for some of the Sunni and actually Al-Qaeda people in Iraq, who once we started pumping oil to Israel, yes, we started pumping oil to Israel, started attacking the Iraqi Iraqi pipelines that were pumping that oil. This is not a well-known secret that really was one of the instruments, if not the instrument, that started the insurgency. Was they discovered we were pumping Iraqi oil to Israel under the auspices of the Deputy Secretary of Defense, Paul Wolfowitz, who had actually ordered the commander, Tommy Franks, to divert an airplane and drop some bombs in a particularly critical place so that this pipeline that we use could be used. All to say that I think what they're doing now primarily, and it's devastating as it was in Iraq and as it was in Afghanistan to our troops, they're developing IEDs, improvised explosive devices. And they're everything from hand-thrown devices to devices that get stuck on the side of a Merkava or whatever type of tank or armored personnel carrier, and they're devastating, and they produce a lot of casualties. So they are improvising to a certain extent, as the name suggests, but they're deadly weapons that they're using, and they're the kind of weapons that ultimately a guerrilla force finds are readily made because the instruments of making them are all over the battlefield. You could probably walk into any of the ruins in Gaza, the way the Israelis have obliterated it, and find the things, the material that you need to make these IEDs. So some of it is, fabricated on the spot, as it were, and they're devastating. They're devastating weapons. But to your bigger point and to Larry's point, and just to return to I think the issue at hand here, Israel is outmatched now. They're outmatched all around the multiple fronts that they're confronting. They're even outmatched, in my mind, they're outmatched by Al-Ansar, the Houthis. They're outmatched by what could come out of Lebanon, particularly if the government continues to get irritated and starts to, not so much think that Hezbollah is a problem, but Hezbollah is their protection. Because that government has to know, regardless of the United States, and the United States might be behind this, Israel wants Lebanon. It wants Lebanon in toto. It also wants huge portions of Syria, and it wants possibly even more of what its greater Zionist approach designates. That includes even parts of Eastern Africa. But I'm sure it includes some of those leaders who are in trouble right now with their own people, like Sisi in Egypt. And that's overstepping yet again. But I come back to my point earlier. They're going to overstep crucially and critically by bringing on the war with Iran again. And that's where the United States has got to make a very crucial decision. Because at that point, Israel will still be operating in accordance with the clean break strategy, with the strategy that replaced that, and with, I think, the strategy that replaced that. Iran is the last state that must fall. Incidentally, there are other states that are supposed to fall too that haven't fallen yet. Interesting concept there. But Iran is the crucial state that has to fall. We're waiting. We're waiting for the war. I think Trita Parsi's right when he says it's coming. And we're waiting. I'm waiting to see if the United States says that's a step too far. We didn't authorize you to do that, or jumps in. And if they jump in, more than air power is not going to do it. And who are they jumping in against? Right now, I'm sure Larry can testify to this better than I, but I'm being told that there are very, very competent Russians in Iran, that they are helping with the latest Russian and Chinese air defense systems. There are Chinese there too. So they're going to run into a buzzsaw in every direction this time. We're looking at a true catastrophe, in my mind.